Welcome to the Beacon Hill Podcast, helping you grow in your faith and shine for Christ. Thanks for joining us. Now here are your hosts, Pastor G.J. Farmer and the Beacon Hill Baptist Church staff.
Welcome back from the hiatus of the Beacon Hill Podcast, but we are back.
Yeah.
We're here. We're ready to do this thing.
Baby.
Better than ever.
Joel's got more energy than he ever has. He's bringing the heat today.
I'm on one today. Let's do this.
Hey, I hope you've had a great summer. We've had a good summer. If you're listening, I'm here with Jake and Joel today, and I want to start off by just asking each of you, give us a highlight of your summer. I mean, it's been a long one.
Yeah.
It's been a good one. Give us a highlight. Who wants to go first? One of y'all go first because I don't know mine yet.
Yeah.
I want to think about it.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I went to Kings Island with the youth group and got to ride a roller coaster for the first time in like 15 years. So.
Okay. Did you get sick?
No, but I got sunburnt, so that was good.
That was good. So, Joel, if you say Kings Island.
Yeah, he took mine. Sorry. I don't have anything. There was a lot of good church stuff. A lot of highlights there. But another highlight for me, me and my immediate family, the four of us, had not taken a vacation, just the four of us, in 2 or 3 years. So we went on vacation together, rode down to Florida, 12 hours. It was awesome.
That's fun.
Hit the beach, had a lot of good food, fun times.
Yeah,
and
that's
you
nice.
got sunburned as well.
I did. The first day, I got sunburned so bad that we took a break from the beach the next day.
Yeah.
It was a rookie mistake.
Yeah, we aren't really beach people for a couple of reasons. One is we burn very badly, and we don't like to apply sunscreen that much.
Mm.
But we did go to Kings Island twice. We went once as a vacation, and then we went the second time, and we took your daughter with us.
Yeah, you took Lila. Had a blast.
Because of the girls' birthdays, and they wanted to do that. That was a lot of fun. That's probably, you kind of took my thunder because I was going to mention the times going to Kings Island because my kids hadn't ridden a big ride like that before. Mm-hmm. The older kids hadn't.
I think my actual highlight was probably I got to go to Fort Worth, Texas for the first time in a long time and visit some friends, and went to see Tarleton State, the baseball facilities.
Nice.
Shout out to Nick and Amy Zaleski down in Stephenville, Texas.
Am I supposed to know who that is?
Everybody should know who that is. They don't, but everybody should.
Are they famous?
No.
Oh, okay. No. I was like, I don't think I know.
No.
Yeah.
Probably some of the best people ever.
Nice.
So
nice.
Shout out to them.
they're going to get, like, because of this podcast, they're going to get like 4 friend requests on Facebook.
Yeah, they're going to have to change from a profile to a page.
They're just going to have to change their names, and it's going to be so popular.
Hey, if you're still listening, we know that you have missed us. You're a true fan because you waited all summer to hear this banter.
They're like, this is what we missed.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to get down to it here. I know you don't want to hear about our summers for 30 minutes or however long. Yesterday, we kicked off a new series that is entitled, What Are We Doing Here? And I guess we could ask that about this podcast so far. Like, what are we doing here, guys? The idea is, asking the question about the church. Like, if we're just coming together every week just to meet together with no real purpose or mission or vision, like really asking the question, what are we doing here? And so yesterday, we started unpacking our mission. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be looking at our core values and why those things need to be important to us as a church and why they will be moving forward. But yeah, yesterday we covered the mission. We looked at the story of Zacchaeus in Luke 19. I want to jump into that just for a second. So if you know the story, and I won't read all of it, but if you know the story, Jesus was passing through Jericho, and there was a guy there who was a tax collector named Zacchaeus. A couple of interesting traits about him. He was very rich, and tax collectors got rich because they essentially ripped people off while they were collecting the taxes. And he was short. And so that made for a combination of the crowd who was following Jesus not wanting to, or, not wanting to let him see Jesus, and him physically not being able to see Jesus over the crowd. So they kind of like smothered him out, so to speak, and his only way to see Jesus was to climb a tree. And so he climbed up the tree, and Jesus passed by, and Jesus told him, hey, come down, I'm going to go to your house. And verse 6 of Luke 19 says, so he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain, he's gone to stay with a sinful man. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, I'll give half my possessions to the poor, Lord, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. Really showing he had a change of heart in his desire to follow the Lord. And so Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham. And then Jesus says plainly here, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. And Jesus, of course, is referring to himself as being the Son of Man. And he said, this is the reason I've come is to seek and to save the people who are far from me, the people who need to be saved. And in thinking about that, we talked about how our mission should really be aligned with the mission of Jesus. It was to seek the lost, which is, we packaged a mission statement that is creating connections and sharing the gospel so people can come to Jesus and grow in him, which, by the way, when I was preaching yesterday, did you all hear me mess that up? That was,
yeah.
So I read it twice off the screen, and then I was like, I'm going to say this, which I can say it.
We've only said that like maybe 1,000
Yeah,
times
I just said it without looking
Yeah.
at it. And so I was like, I can say this. And I got cocky
Yeah.
and overconfident, and,
That's what happens. Kids,
you know,
lesson to
a little
you.
piece of humble
Stay
pie.
humble, man.
Yeah, a little piece of humble pie. But anyway, so seeking and saving the lost is this idea of like creating connections. You're seeking people out to, connect with them in personal ways and sharing the gospel with them so they can come to Jesus and grow in him. So we talked about how the crowd was working in opposition to that in some ways, maybe some meaning to, some not meaning to, because they were just with the crowd, but especially the ones who were complaining about Jesus working on his mission. And we talked about how sometimes we can get out of line with the mission, but also just forget about the mission. And so in thinking about that, one of the things I think is important to discuss, why do you think it's important for a church to have a clear mission? And not only that, like Jesus has given that, but why is it important that we remember it and have it maybe written in a statement like this that we can look to and read or memorize? What are your all's thoughts?
I think that if you don't have a clear mission that is constantly in front of you that you're looking to fulfill, it's very easy to get distracted and kind of just not really know. It's really hard to discern direction and go in the right way if you don't have a target that you're trying to hit. I know that like a lot of churches, and I think our church, most churches, I think the Great Commission, they kind of just say like, well, that's our mission statement. And that's awesome. That's in Scripture, but it doesn't really speak to specifically how you're going to do that. Like it's more like, this is what we're called to as Christians. But in our mission statement that we put out yesterday, it's very much the creating connections is going to be a high priority for us, and sharing the gospel is going to be a high priority, so that everything that anything new that we come up with, anything that we're trying to decide whether to continue, it's all going to be filtered through, does it accomplish this?
Well, here's the issue. If we're not creating connections, and let's just say we say, well, we're going to share the gospel. Well, if you leave that first piece off, it's very easy to get in a Christian bubble where you're not talking and communicating with lost people. And even if you are, like throughout the day, like for folks who, go to work or whatever, like if you're not thinking about, hey, this is my mission as I create these connections with people with the intention of share the gospel, like if you're not thinking about that, it's easy to just go throughout your day and to not be worried about it. Or even still, the crowd, they were complaining about Jesus hanging out with sinners. It may be easy to think, I don't need to talk to them that much. Like, their morality or their, ethics or whatever language is not really the kind that would be approved of in Christian circles or whatever. And I do think there's a bit of wisdom that has to be, like, we don't want our best friends to be people who will steer us away from the Lord, but we do have to interact with unbelievers if we're going to share the gospel. And we do have to have a relationship formed enough with unbelievers that they care about what we have to say. And so that's this idea of creating connections, that, we're going to put ourselves out there a little more with the intentionality of connecting with unbelievers. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Did I say anything you were going to say? Or?
I think, part of the mission statement is, yes, we know that the Great Commission is what the Lord has given us to do, and the mission statement helps us stay focused in doing the Great Commission in the geographical place God has placed us, in the time period, in the culture that God has placed us. And we know that it is so easy in this day and age for people to feel lonely, to feel disconnected due to a bunch of things, and technology and other things. And in connections, people searching for a way to be fulfilled and find community. I feel like, the creating connections, that is our way of fulfilling this Great Commission that God has given us.
So since we've talked a lot about this connection part, what would that look like? Let's just say, let's look at it at two different levels. One on like a personal level of saying, I'm going to live out intentionally this idea of creating connections and sharing the gospel. What would that look like in somebody's life, those types of connections that you're looking for? But also, what would it look like for our church to create connections? What does that actually tangibly look like? What are your all's thoughts? And I can start if you want me to start, or you guys can start. I don't know. We haven't done this in a while, so y'all just jump in.
Whatever.
The way in my personal life I've found is to create connections with people with things that you're already passionate about. There's men in our church that love to golf, and they'll meet people, and it's not this artificial thing where they're awkwardly trying to create these relationships, but they're already having natural connections through things that they enjoy. I've joined hobby groups. I'm a big nerd, and I've found some other nerds that like to play board games. And so I used to get together.
You can say the name of it.
No, I'm not going to do that right now. But I like to play board games. And through this, I got to create some connections, share the gospel. And one young man even came to church because of it. And just finding places in life where we can be open and also looking, instead of, I could easily just be on my phone at my son's t-ball game and kind of just focus on what he's doing, and when he's not up to bat, be on my phone and be about me. Or I could look in the sidelines and see, is there someone else around where it's worth making a connection with? It's also being open to those opportunities that God has placed right in front of our face.
So let me just kind of share a personal story here, kind of based on something you said that kind of, made me feel bad, because it was at the time it was a missed opportunity. And looking back, let me just share it because it'll make sense. So Jack, my oldest son, was playing a lot of baseball this past spring and summer. And, as part of that, one of the things, like the age he is now is not an age where I'm really getting involved in coaching. Like, I'm mostly sitting on the sides and cheering and things like that for the games, or practice will just be drop them off and come pick them back up. Well, I hadn't really talked to the coach too much about church, or, we talked a little bit about baseball and the things that we needed to know with practices and games and all that stuff. Well, anyway, the season went by and it ended, and 2 or 3 weeks after the season ended, his coach came to church. And, they've still been coming to church, him and his family. And I was talking to him the other day, and I was like, man, I apologize because I didn't even know y'all were looking at a church, like, or looking for a church or whatever. Like, I didn't ever invite you to church. And to me, like, based on, you know, something you were saying there, it's kind of like that was maybe a misconnection that I had, a missed opportunity that I had, where somebody was potentially looking for a church or looking to get connected to the Lord in some way. And, you know, I didn't. Now, let me just say, I'll caveat this with, and this is maybe to make myself feel better, I don't know, but we can't expect to get every connection.
Right.
But if you all want to throw me under the bus still, you can. But
I mean, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
That's true.
So
that is true. I've heard like 3 people quote that. But anyway,
Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
yeah. But the and now you,
And now me. Yeah.
so I don't know who you were quoting there, but one of the
One
other
of
people.
the two.
But anyway, but while we can't necessarily create every connection, we do want to live with an intentionality to think, one, that I'm creating connections, I'm creating relationships, but 2, within those relationships, I'm thinking about and moving toward somehow sharing the gospel in those relationships. But yeah, why else do you maybe think, or how else do you think it looks to create connections?
Well, I was going to say, like, for us, well, me personally, like, just being a pastor, but I think this can apply to most Christians. Like, everything that we do tends to be around other Christians just naturally. Like, you know, if we're here at work, we're at a church, we go to church with other people. My kids are at a Christian school. If I go to one of their practices, you know, everybody's supposed to be a Christian and going to a church to be in the school, you know. So it's one of those things where I think we have to be active and intentional about finding those connections sometimes. And so, like I said, I think using the opportunities that we get with our kids' friends and sports, and just there's a whole bunch of different ways that you come into contact with people that if you're not actively thinking about it, you can miss that opportunity. Like you didn't think you were being rude or anything. Like, you're just talking to the guy, but it just didn't occur to you. And I think that we all do that all the time, where it was like, oh man, like I could have invited him to church. I could have asked him about, you know, his background or whatever. And I just didn't do it. So, like, you know, I've played in a few golf scrambles and just different things where it may not be necessarily something where, like, you don't want to run up to him and go, hey, do you know Jesus? You know, whatever. But it's like, we've talked about this on Wednesdays, where, like, you tell your own story, and that can open up a lot of doors. But being active and thinking about those opportunities, I think, is an important thing.
So as a church, some of what this looks like, and we've already done some of this, are just creating opportunities for us to meet people and have conversations with people who don't go to church here or maybe anywhere, and trying to just find opportunities and avenues within this area to connect with those people. And so some of that may be having a fun event outside of the church walls. Some of it may be having a fun event here on campus, and we're inviting the community to come. You know, we're going to see and do more of that moving forward. Just creating those opportunities, because you never know who you'll meet who may be looking for the Lord, or looking for, you know, getting back into church when they haven't been in a long time or ever. And yeah, the creating connections part, it's just, it creates a lot of opportunities for those conversations.
Yeah, our Burnside Block Party event was kind of, we were already talking about these sorts of things, and that was kind of the heart of it. And it seems like some good connections were made. Yeah.
And, you know, with that, and then of course, you know, there are things like, so the Easter thing that we did an Easter outreach here, which was like a, kind of like a fall festival, but for the spring, for Easter. But even things like Bible school and these cooking camps and things that we do for kids, those are ways to reach out. I think, we'll probably be looking at some other avenues. Like, I know you all have mentioned golf scrambles a couple of times. We have one for the church. I think that anytime we have an opportunity like that to invite people outside the church, those would be ways to connect with people. Just different things like that we're like, hey, this may not be necessarily an event that we're bringing people to, that we're going to preach and have an altar call and do all this kind of stuff, but it is an event that they're going to come to and be exposed to our people of the church, and we're going to have conversations, and then hopefully, at the very least, send them home with some materials about the Lord or something to be able to connect them with the Lord. But all these things are important. Let's move on. Do you feel like, let's go from a personal standpoint, coming back to the idea of the mission as a whole. When are times that maybe you're tempted or actually do tend to get your eyes off the mission and maybe focused on other things? What are some things that maybe happen or get your thought process in a wrong place, and how do you get recentered on the mission? And I'll just jump in here because I was thinking about this. For me, I think one of the things that it's very easy to do, especially being a pastor of the church, is letting other things kind of sidetrack you, where, maybe certain metrics like numbers in church, or maybe people that maybe are disgruntled about something or complaining about something, or even, just your own spiritual health. All of these things can kind of sidetrack you, or sidetrack me at least, from keeping the main thing, because I tend to worry about all these other things. And when you start worrying about all these other things, what happens is those become the drivers of what you do. Like, you want to make people happy, or you want to better this certain thing that maybe has nothing to do with the mission. And so you begin to pour all your efforts and energy into those things. And then the next thing you know, you haven't thought about the mission for a good while. And maybe your driver in ministry becomes something totally different. I think sometimes that may be why some people burn out in ministry, is because the driver for that ministry becomes something it shouldn't be. And you can't keep up. You can't, meet the mark of where you think you need to meet it for some of these things you're trying to do. I don't know. But I'm answering it from a pastor, like a senior pastor point of view. I think it would be helpful for us to think about as well, just a church member point of view or whatever. But what are your all's thoughts?
I can remember a time as a church member when I was younger. I came back from a mission trip, and I was really excited and on fire, and had this idea about how my church could kind of start a new ministry. And so I kind of met with a pastor about it, and he didn't discourage the idea, but the more questions that he asked, it just kind of became clear that the opportunity, while it would have been maybe, I would have felt like I was doing a lot. The church as the whole, it didn't really build up the church or really reach a lot of people. And I came away from that meeting pretty discouraged, but the older I get, the more I see that, with that, while my intentions were good and maybe it wasn't a bad idea, it just didn't fit in with reaching as many people at that particular church's community, and it didn't involve enough people in the mission either. It was about me, and so it can be tempting for us to have good ideas or things that we're passionate about, but they don't always fit in with what God is doing in the local church then and there. And that doesn't mean that it should stop us from doing it. But there are times where, kind of our personal passions become bigger than what God's doing.
So from a church leadership point of view, one of the things I often think about, while yes, whatever God wants us to do as a church. Like he's going to bring the resources to do it, whether that means money or people or whatever else. The thing that I keep thinking about is the resources we have at this point in time are what God has given us. And so we need to take those with our campus, our time, our people, our money, and I say knowing all this stuff is given to us by God to use. And we say, because this is the Lord's, and he wants us and has mandated us to accomplish the mission of reaching people and leading them in a growing relationship with him, how can we best maximize this or best steward this to see that work done? And if you only have certain amount of time or certain amount of money or certain amount of people, whatever, like, what are the things you're going to say no to so you can say yes to these other things? And, for me, it's kind of a different mentality even because there are, and I mentioned a little bit in the sermon Sunday, there are many good things that the church can and should be involved in. I mentioned feeding people and clothing people and helping the needy and helping the homeless and all of these types of things. But to pull the gospel out of that and to say we're going to just feed people without sharing the gospel with them, that would be completely pointless from the mission. Like if you think about in the New Testament, any time that this stuff happened with the apostles or the disciples or anybody, like it was to help the spread of the gospel. Like miracles were being done to help the gospel spread. It wasn't just to heal somebody. It was to heal somebody so they would listen to the gospel message. They didn't just clothe people or help the needy or help the poor. It was, no, we're going to do this because we are sharing the gospel with these people and we want to reach these people with the gospel. So there are plenty of mission projects and outside mission groups that are great projects and great and worthwhile missions to be done. But yet, because we have this ultimate mandate, this ultimate mission and purpose as a church, anything we do, we have to say, does that fit into the mission of sharing the gospel? And if not, are we able to fit the gospel into that? And there are just some things that, quite frankly, maybe you aren't able to for various reasons. Unfortunately, one of the things that I see happen a lot of times with certain groups is, once like state funding gets involved, it rips away the ability to share the gospel because, if you're getting state funding, then you are, presented with red tape. I heard of a church one time who was involved in a feeding program, and because the money for the food was being given subsidized from the state, they were told, even though it was in the church building, they couldn't share the gospel with people. And that, I feel like, is not a good approach to what we're here for and what the mission's about. That was a rant. Sorry. There you go.
That's good. That's fine.
Hey, I've got a whole summer to make up for it.
Yeah. You had that memorized, didn't you?
Yeah. Were you going to say something? You're the only one who hasn't commented on
I don't
this
even
yet.
remember the question. No. No, I think I think
you
so.
can read it off the paper if you need to.
No, we're talking about
how do you
getting sidetracked from the mission. And
we're getting sidetracked from our discussion now at this point. How do you get sidetracked from the mission?
Those are all good things. Being a music guy, I'm very visual, so I was just looking at you, man.
That's all right.
But no, I think that for me personally, it's really easy for me to just fall into a routine and just kind of get through the day sometimes, So like, I know I got to get up in the morning. We get our kids ready for school. I take them to school. I go to church here, go to work, and then pick up the kids from school. They got practice, and next thing you know, we're at the end of the day. And there's a lot of times where I just kind of can get into that groove. and I don't really take the time to think like, okay, how should I be spending this day? Like, what opportunities is God presenting to me today that I could take advantage of, or that I could, be used by Him? And so that's one thing that I have to fight against a lot, is just, all of a sudden realizing that a month's gone by and all I've done is just gone through the motions of everything in life that's going on, instead of being mindful of those things.
So what are some ways, as we're almost out of time here, but what are some ways that we as the church can support each other in making sure we stay on mission? What are some ways that, and when I say each other, I mean like as individuals and as the church, just quickly, what are some thoughts from you guys?
I'm going to go first.
Go ahead.
Well, I think for me, I think that series like this help, and then also being intentional about discipleship and all those things where we can remind one another of what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. Keeping the mission statement actually on our lips, like speaking those words all the time into each other, and then being able to sometimes when we see people kind of drifting or whatever, just having the courage to kind of correct and be like, hey man, I see that you're super passionate about this, and you're kind of have this strong opinion. Have you thought about how it's not as important really as what we're here to do, and all these things. And I think we just have to constantly be building each other up in that way.
I know our high school ladies grow group, they ask the question, who's your one, to one another. They have one person, one connection that they're trying to make and praying.
Oh, that wasn't like, they're not Indiana fans?
No.
Oh, so they're not saying who's your
No, not who's your one.
Oh, okay.
Who is your one?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And they're actively praying and asking each other, are you praying? Are you reaching out? Are you making that connection? And I think we could do the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Just, keeping it at the forefront of our minds, and just kind of doing that introspection. I think a lot of asking ourselves, where our heart is, where our biggest, treasure is, where our biggest complaint is when it comes to what we're doing for the Lord. And a lot of times that reveals that. But also, as we're working together, I think a big thing is encouraging each other to get involved. Like, it's easy to say we have a mission statement, but unless we're like doing the mission, and we're going to talk about this at some point in the future, but unless we're doing the mission, it does no good to have a mission statement. It's just a sentence. And so just challenging each other to get involved, to start serving, but have that heart and that attitude begin with you to say, I'm going to, sacrificially, selflessly serve for the sake of the mission, and encourage each other to get involved. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think from Luke 19, we can take away that after meeting Jesus, this wee little man became we before me.
Yeah. That's good, bro. We're going to end with that.
Oh my gosh.
How long have you thought of that?
Towards the beginning of the podcast.
He's the best of us, for sure.
All right, we're going to leave you with that. Hope you've enjoyed. We'll be back next week. It's been fun hanging out with you guys.
You've been listening to the Beacon Hill Podcast. For more information about Beacon Hill Baptist Church, visit beaconhillbaptist.com.